Part 1. Memories and Danger. There are sounds a man never forgets. The creak of a rope being drawn through dry dirt. The panting of tracking dogs in the distance. The whisper of wind through a canyon at dawn. For Caleb Stone, these sounds had haunted him for 39 years, ever since that June morning in 1878 when he made a choice that would define the rest of his life. Montana, 1917. The autumn sun hung low over the Bitterroot Valley, painting the cabin logs in shades of amber and gold. Caleb sat in his rocking chair on the porch, his once powerful frame now bent with age, his thick beard gone white as fresh snow. His hands, gnarled and spotted, trembled slightly as they gripped the armrests. But his eyes, those gray eyes that had seen too much, remained sharp as broken glass. Beside him sat Timothy, his great-grandson, a boy of 12 with dark hair and the same questioning eyes that Caleb had possessed at that age. The boy had been pestering him for weeks to tell the story, the one his mother said was too dangerous, too complicated for young ears. But Caleb knew better. The boy needed to hear it. The world needed to remember. Timothy leaned forward in his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grandpa Caleb, why do you keep that dream catcher in your room? Mama says it's Apache. She says the Apache were our enemies." Caleb was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting across the valley to the mountains beyond. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. "Not all stories are what people tell you, boy. Sometimes the enemy becomes family, and family, that becomes the only thing that truly matters. Can you tell me?" Timothy's eyes were wide with curiosity. Caleb closed his eyes, and the years fell away like autumn leaves. "It's a long story. A story about a woman who taught me what real courage means, about a choice I made in 3 seconds that changed everything." He paused, then added, "Do you know what the hardest thing in life is, Timothy? It's not fighting. It's knowing when to fight and when to heal." The old man's voice dropped lower, taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "Let me take you back to New Mexico Territory, June 1878, back to the day I learned that saving one life could save your own soul." The world dissolved around them, and Timothy found himself transported to another time, another place, where the air was hot and dry and danger lurked behind every rock. New Mexico Territory, June 12, 1878. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the pale morning sky. At 8,000 feet, the air was thin and cold, even as the sun climbed higher. Caleb Stone, 39 years old then, moved through the pine forest with the silence of a hunting cat. His body was a monument to mountain living. 6'3", broad-shouldered, with muscles hardened by years of hauling traps and skinning game. His beard was thick and dark brown, shot through with gray, falling halfway down his chest. His hair, long and tied back with a strip of leather, hung between his shoulder blades. He wore buckskin elk hide, soft and weathered, that made no sound as he walked. In his hands he carried a Sharps .50 caliber rifle, the kind that could drop an elk at 400 yards. At his hip hung a Bowie knife with a blade as long as his forearm. These were not decorations. These were tools of survival, extensions of his body, as natural to him as breathing. Caleb was checking his trap line, a circuit he ran every 3 days through these mountains. Rabbit mostly, sometimes fox. The pelts brought decent money when he bothered to make the long ride down to Two Rivers Town. But money wasn't why he lived up here. He lived here because the mountains didn't judge. They didn't ask questions. They didn't care that he had deserted from the Army 14 years ago, that he had walked away from his post after Sand Creek, that he had chosen conscience over country. He crouched by a trap, sprung but empty. Something had stolen the bait. Clever. He reset it with practiced hands, then stood, his joints protesting slightly. He was getting older. The cold mornings reminded him of that. That's when he heard it, faint, carried on the wind. Voices, angry voices, and beneath them the sound of horses shifting, leather creaking, metal jingling. cavalry. Caleb moved to the edge of a rocky outcrop and pulled out his telescope, a battered brass instrument he had carried since his army days. He extended it slowly, scanning the valley below. 400 yards down, in a clearing near a dry creek bed, he saw them. 8 cavalry soldiers, their blue uniforms dark with sweat and dust. Sergeant Bull Mackenzie was easy to recognize even at this distance, a hulking man with a cruel face and a reputation to match. And in the center of them, on her knees with her hands bound behind her back, was an Apache woman. Caleb's breath caught. A rope was already looped around her neck, the other end tied to Mackenzie's saddle horn. They were going to drag her. It was a common enough punishment in these parts, meant to send a message, meant to break the spirit of any Apache who dared resist the reservation system, meant to be a spectacle. But Caleb had seen what happened to people dragged behind horses. The human body was not meant to be torn apart like that. No one deserved to die that way. He lowered the telescope, his jaw clenched. Every instinct told him to stay hidden, to stay safe, to let the soldiers do their brutal work and move on. He had spent 14 years avoiding exactly this kind of trouble. Intervening meant revealing himself. It meant potentially being recognized as a deserter. It meant putting himself between armed soldiers and their prey. But then another sound reached him, softer than the wind. The woman was singing, not screaming, not begging, singing. An Apache prayer song, steady and clear, facing death with dignity. Caleb's hands tightened on his rifle. 14 years ago, he had stood by and watched innocent people die at Sand Creek. He had been too young, too afraid, too bound by orders to do anything. He had sworn, kneeling in the blood-soaked snow afterward, that he would never stand by again. Never. He laid the rifle down carefully. If he went down there armed, this would end in gunfire. He needed to talk his way through this. He checked the knife at his hip, took a deep breath, and began to climb down. The descent took 8 minutes. Caleb moved like water, reading the terrain, using shadows, making no sound. The Apache had taught him that. Zitkala had taught him that, back when she was alive, back when he still believed that love could bridge the gap between two worlds. He emerged from behind a large boulder about 30 yards from the soldiers, his hands raised high and empty. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and cold as a mountain stream. "Hold it." The effect was immediate. Mackenzie's head snapped around. The other soldiers reached for their weapons. The woman, still on her knees, turned her face toward him. Her eyes were dark and fierce, her face streaked with dust but unbroken. Mackenzie's hand went to his pistol. "Stone, what the hell are you doing here?" So he had been recognized. Caleb filed that away for later worry. "What's happening here, Mackenzie?" "None of your damn business, Stone. This is Army work." Caleb took a step closer, his hands still raised, his posture non-threatening, but his presence unmistakable. At 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle and bone, he was hard to ignore. "The woman is on Jicarilla land, treaty land. You don't have jurisdiction here." Mackenzie spat into the dust. "She's Apache. That's all the jurisdiction I need." "Not according to the treaty signed in 73. This land is sovereign. You're trespassing, Sergeant, and you know it." One of the younger soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Caleb noted that. Good. Not all of them were comfortable with what was about to happen. Mackenzie's face darkened. "She's a criminal. She was caught off the reservation." "Caught doing what? Breathing? You calling me a liar, Stone?" Caleb's voice didn't rise, didn't waver. "I'm saying if you want to hang her, you'll have to hang me first. And you know what that means. An explanation to Colonel Blackwood. An explanation to Washington. Why did you kill a civilian on treaty land? How does that conversation go for your career, Mackenzie?" The sergeant's hand tightened on his pistol, but Caleb could see the calculation in his eyes. Mackenzie was a bully, and bullies understood one thing: consequences. The standoff lasted 30 seconds. It felt like 30 minutes. Then Mackenzie cursed, a long string of profanity that echoed off the rocks. He dismounted, cut the rope from his saddle horn, and threw it to the ground. "She's your problem now, Stone. But you're making a bed you'll regret lying in. This isn't over." He gestured to his men. They mounted up, casting dark looks at Caleb and the woman. Within minutes they were riding away in a cloud of dust, heading back toward Fort Stanton. Caleb waited until they were out of sight before he lowered his hands. He walked slowly to the woman, moving with deliberate care. She watched him approach, her body tense, ready to run or fight despite her bound hands. He pulled his knife from its sheath. She flinched, but he simply reached behind her and with a quick motion cut the ropes binding her wrists. The raw, bloody skin underneath made him wince. She had been bound for a long time. He didn't try to touch her. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Can you walk?" She nodded, her voice hoarse from singing. "Yes. They'll come back, with more men. You need to move." She stood slowly, testing her legs. She was about 5'6", lean and strong, with long black hair and eyes that missed nothing. Despite the ordeal, despite the pain, she held herself like a warrior. "I cannot leave," she said, her English accented but clear. "I have a mission." Caleb studied her. "What mission is worth dying for?" 23 children at San Carlos Reservation are dying from lung sickness. I need sacred blue sage from White Mountain. Without it, they die in 8 days. Caleb was silent for a moment. Then, to his own surprise, he felt a slight pull at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. "Well then, that sounds like a good reason." The woman blinked, clearly not expecting that response. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. The hint of a smile touched her lips. "You do not ask why you should help me?" Caleb shrugged, a gesture as natural as breathing. "I just did. You answered, 23 children. That's reason enough." She studied him with new interest. "Why do you help me? You do not know me." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Once I stood by and watched innocent people die. I swore I would never let that happen again. You are different from other white men. I lived with the Jicarilla Apache for 6 years. My wife was Apache. She taught me that people are people. Skin color doesn't define who we are." Something shifted in the woman's eyes. "Your wife, where is she now?" Caleb's voice dropped. "She died 3 years ago. Smallpox." A moment of silence passed between them, heavy with shared loss. Then the woman spoke softly. "I am sorry." "Thank you." He cleared his throat, moving past the emotion. "Blue sage grows at White Mountain 12 miles west, but the cavalry will be patrolling everywhere looking for you. We need to avoid them." The woman looked up at the sun, reading it like a map. Her eyes scanned the terrain, taking in every ridge, every canyon, every possible path. "If we go straight, we meet them. But if we circle through Copper Canyon, cross the Mimbers Creek, we can approach White Mountain from the north. They will not expect that." Caleb looked at her with genuine surprise. "You know the terrain?" "My father taught me to read the land. Every stream, every path. A healer must know how to reach any village, even in darkness." He nodded slowly, impressed. "That's smart." They began walking, heading north into rougher country. After a few minutes of silence, the woman gestured to a plant growing beside the trail, its leaves a silvery green. "This is desert willow. The bark cures headaches. My father used it often." Caleb stopped, examining the plant. "Delgadito, the Jicarilla medicine man, he used this too. He was your father's friend." She turned to him, surprise clear in her eyes. "You knew Delgadito?" "He taught me. He was my teacher, like a father. He died 4 years ago." Her eyes grew wet. "My father said Delgadito was his best friend. Then you and we share the same roots." Caleb nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why we met today." By late afternoon they reached Caleb's cabin. It sat on a high ridge at 8,000 feet, built from thick pine logs chinked with mud and moss. The view stretched for miles, overlooking a valley where elk grazed in the meadows. A small creek burbled 50 yards away, providing fresh water year-round. It was isolated, defensible, and beautiful. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's dwelling. One large room with a stone fireplace at one end, a sturdy wooden table and 2 chairs, a bed frame covered with a bearskin, and most surprisingly, a small shelf holding 8 books. Shakespeare, the Bible, a medical text, a journal filled with Caleb's cramped handwriting. But what caught the woman's eye immediately was the dream catcher hanging in the window. It was jicarilla style, intricate and beautiful, with white and blue beads woven into the web. Only a medicine woman would be allowed to make such a thing. She approached it slowly, reaching out but not quite touching. This is from your wife?" Caleb set down his pack, not looking at her. "Zitkala gave it to me. She said it would protect me from nightmares." "Do you still have nightmares?" He paused, then answered with brutal honesty. "Every night. About the people I couldn't save." She turned to face him, her expression softer now. "But today you saved me. Perhaps that is the first step to make the nightmares go away." Caleb cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the emotion. "You're hungry. I'll make food." As he began preparing a simple meal of dried venison and cornmeal cakes, she watched him. His movements were efficient, practiced. This was a man who had lived alone for a long time and knew how to take care of himself. After they ate, Caleb noticed her wrists were still bleeding slightly from the ropes. He retrieved his medicine kit, a leather pouch containing various salves and bandages, some store-bought, some made from Apache herbs. "I need to bandage those wounds. You can do it yourself or let me help." She hesitated, then extended her hands. "You help." Caleb took her wrists gently in his large, calloused hands. The skin was torn, bruised deep purple, rubbed raw by the rough hemp. He poured whiskey over the wounds first, and though she bit her lip, she made no sound. Then he applied a salve made from bear grease and yarrow, working with surprising gentleness for such large hands. Finally, he wrapped them in clean cloth. As he worked, he spoke quietly. "You're very brave. Not everyone can endure pain like that without crying out. My father taught me pain as a teacher. It shows us our limits and how to pass them." Caleb paused in his bandaging, looking up at her. "Your father was a medicine man?" She nodded. "Nazario. He taught me everything about healing. Then he died trying to save children during a cavalry raid." Caleb's hands stilled completely. Delgadito spoke of Nazario. He said Nazario was one of the greatest medicine men he had ever known. Her eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. "You knew of my father?" "Through Delgadito, yes. I'm sorry for your loss." They sat in silence as the sun set outside, painting the cabin walls in shades of orange and red. Finally the woman spoke again. "I am Naiche, daughter of Nazario, medicine woman of the Chiricahua Apache. Caleb Stone, mountain man, former deserter, friend to the Jicarilla." She almost smiled at his blunt honesty. "Thank you for saving me, Caleb Stone." "We saved each other," he replied simply. As darkness fell, Caleb built up the fire and made coffee from his precious stores. They sat across from each other, and for the first time in 3 years, Caleb did not feel alone. But peace never lasted long in the territory. Just as Naiche was beginning to relax, they heard it. Distant at first, then growing louder. The baying of tracking dogs, the sound every fugitive dreads. Caleb was at the window in an instant, peering down into the valley below. He could see them clearly in the moonlight. 20 torches, 20 men on horseback. And at their head, riding a white horse that gleamed like bone, was a figure Caleb recognized even at this distance. Colonel Marcus Blackwood. "How many?" Naiche asked. moving to stand beside him. 20, led by Blackwood himself. Why would a colonel personally hunt for one Apache woman? Caleb turned to look at her, his face grim in the firelight. I think there's something you need to tell me. Why does Blackwood want you so badly? Naiche's face went pale. He thinks I killed his son. Did you? No, but I was there when he died, and I cannot prove my innocence. Caleb looked back out the window. The torches were closer now, maybe 15 minutes away. The dogs had their scent. There would be no reasoning this time, no talking their way out. Blackwood was not Mackenzie. Blackwood was driven by something deeper than duty. He was driven by grief. We have to run, Caleb said quietly. Right now. Where? South, through Dead Horse Canyon. It's the only route they won't dare follow. Naiche's eyes widened. Dead Horse Canyon? That's where that is. Dangerous, I know. But it's our only chance. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I trust you. Those 3 words carried more weight than she knew. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt since Zitkala died. Connection, purpose, hope. He grabbed supplies quickly, jerky, pemmican, canteens of water, his rifle and knife, a coil of rope. Then he paused and took the dream catcher from the window, tucking it carefully into his pack. Why take that? Naiche asked. Because Zitkala told me it would protect me, and tonight we need all the protection we can get. They slipped out the back of the cabin as the torches reached the base of the ridge. The dogs were howling now, excited by the fresh scent. Caleb led the way into the darkness, moving by instinct and memory, with Naiche following close behind. Behind them, they heard men shouting, heard the cabin door being kicked in. But by then, they were 200 yards away and moving fast, heading toward the mouth of Dead Horse Canyon. And as they ran through the night, pursued by men who wanted blood, Caleb thought about that moment when he had stepped out from behind the boulder with his hands raised. 3 seconds to make a decision. 3 seconds that had changed everything. The old man's voice faded as the scene dissolved around young Timothy. They were back on the porch in Montana, 1917. The sun had moved lower in the sky. Timothy sat forward, breathless. What happened next, Grandpa? Caleb smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. That boy is where the real story begins, because running into Dead Horse Canyon, that was just the first test. What came after, that's what taught me about courage, about sacrifice, and about what one person can do when they choose to stand up for what's right. He stood slowly, his old joints creaking. But that's enough for today. The rest of the story will have to wait. But Grandpa, I need to know if you made it out of the canyon, if you and Naiche escaped, if... Caleb placed a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. We did, Timothy. We did. And the journey we took, the things we learned, the stand we made, that's what changed everything. Not just for us, but for hundreds of people. Sometimes one moment of courage, one choice to do what's right instead of what's easy, that's all it takes to change the world. He looked out over the valley one more time, his eyes distant with memory. Remember that, boy. When your time comes to choose, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. That's what Naiche taught me. That's what I'm teaching you. And with that, the first chapter of the story ended, leaving young Timothy and countless others hungry to know what happened next in the mountains of New Mexico in that summer of 1878, when a mountain man and an Apache healer learned that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with bullets, but with the simple, stubborn refusal to let injustice stand. Part 2. The Chase and the Truth. Dead Horse Canyon earned its name honestly. In the spring of 1871, a freight company lost an entire wagon train there when a flash flood swept through the narrow gorge, taking 16 horses and 3 men with it. The canyon was a wound cut into the earth, 200 feet deep in places, with walls so steep and smooth that even mountain goats avoided it. There was only one path through, a ledge barely 2 feet wide that clung to the western wall like a scar. It was suicide to attempt it in daylight. In darkness, it was madness. Caleb and Nietzsche reached the canyon mouth 20 minutes ahead of their pursuers. The moon was a thin crescent, providing just enough light to see shapes but not details. Everything was shadow and suggestion, treacherous and unknowable. Caleb stopped at the entrance, breathing hard. Behind them, the dogs were getting closer. He could hear Blackwood shouting orders, organizing his men for a systematic search. They had minutes, maybe less. "Stay close," Caleb said, his voice low. "Step where I step. Keep your hand on the wall. Don't look down." Nietzsche looked into the black maw of the canyon. Even in darkness, she could sense the depth, the danger. But she simply nodded. "I trust you." She had said those words before, but this time they carried the weight of their lives. Trust, in this moment, meant everything. They entered the canyon. Immediately the temperature dropped 15 degrees. The walls blocked what little moonlight there was, plunging them into a darkness so complete that Caleb had to navigate by touch alone. His right hand traced along the rock wall, feeling for the beginning of the ledge path. His left hand held his rifle. Behind him, Nietzsche moved with surprising quiet, her Apache training evident in every careful step. The ledge was worse than Caleb remembered. Years of erosion had made it narrower, more crumbling. In places the path was barely 18 inches wide. On their right, solid rock. On their left, nothing but empty air and a 200-foot drop to the canyon floor. They moved in inches. Caleb would slide his foot forward, test the stability of the rock, shift his weight, then move the other foot. Behind him, Nietzsche matched his rhythm exactly. Neither spoke. Speaking would have broken their concentration, and concentration was the only thing keeping them alive. 30 minutes in, disaster struck. Nietzsche stepped on a loose stone. It shifted beneath her foot with a sound like cracking ice. Her ankle rolled. She fell sideways, away from the wall, away from safety, toward the void. Caleb heard the scrape of boot on stone, heard her sharp intake of breath. He dropped his rifle, spun, and grabbed for her. His hand found her wrist just as her feet went over the edge. The sudden weight nearly pulled him over as well, but his other hand found a crack in the rock wall, and he held on with every ounce of strength in his body. For a moment, they hung there, suspended between life and death. Caleb's arm muscles screamed. His shoulder joint felt like it was tearing. Nietzsche dangled in space, her other hand clawing at the rock face, finding nothing. "Don't look down," Caleb grunted through clenched teeth. "Look at me." Nietzsche's eyes found his in the darkness. Even in that moment of terror, she did not scream, did not panic. She simply looked at him with absolute trust. "I will not let you fall," Caleb said. Using strength he didn't know he still possessed, he pulled. Nietzsche scrambled with her feet, found a tiny purchase on the rock, and pushed. Together they hauled her back onto the ledge. They collapsed against the wall, hearts hammering, breathing hard. Caleb's hands were shaking. "You okay?" "Yes." Her voice was steady, but he could feel her trembling. "Thank you." "We save each other," he said, echoing her words from before. "That's how this works." They rested for 30 seconds, no more. Behind them, faint now but still present, came the sound of the tracking dogs. The animals had reached the canyon mouth, but were refusing to enter. Smart dogs. But Blackwood wouldn't give up. He would find another way around, even if it took all night. They continued. Another hour of slow, careful movement through the darkness. Caleb's rifle was gone, lost in the moment he had grabbed for Nietzsche. It was somewhere at the bottom of the canyon now, along with his telescope that had fallen from his pack. But they were alive. That was what mattered. Finally, near dawn, they emerged from the eastern mouth of the canyon. The first pink light of sunrise was touching the mountaintops. They had made it through. Behind them, Dead Horse Canyon stood silent and forbidding. Somewhere on the other side, Blackwood and his men were still searching, but they had lost the trail. They would have to give up or go the long way around, adding at least 10 hours to their pursuit. Caleb and Naichi climbed to a rocky outcrop and sat, exhausted. Neither had slept in over 30 hours. Both were bruised, scraped, and running on nothing but willpower. "We should rest," Naichi said. Caleb shook his head. "Just an hour, then we move. We're still 20 miles from White Mountain, and we've lost time." They sat in silence as the sun rose, painting the desert below in shades of orange and gold. It was a landscape of harsh beauty, unforgiving and magnificent. After a while, Naichi spoke quietly. "How long have you lived alone?" 3 years, since Zitkala died." "Is it lonely?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice carried a weight of truth. "Every day. But being alone is better than hurting people by being close to them. You did not hurt me. You saved me. Today. But tomorrow? People around me tend to find trouble." Naichi almost smiled. "I had trouble before I met you. Perhaps together we find less trouble." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, in the growing daylight. She was strong, this Apache woman. Strong in ways that had nothing to do with muscle. Strong in the way that survivors are strong, the way people who have lost everything and kept going anyway are strong. "Maybe," he said softly. "Maybe you're right." They rested for an hour, taking turns keeping watch. Then they continued south and west, aiming for White Mountain. But the detour through Dead Horse Canyon had taken them 20 miles out of their way. They would have to pass through territory that neither of them knew well, land that was claimed by the Comanche, ancient enemies of the Apache. By mid-afternoon, as they crossed a dried creek bed, they heard the sound of hooves. 4 riders appeared on the ridge above them. Comanche warriors, lean and dangerous, carrying rifles and wearing war paint. The lead warrior, a man of about 40 with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, rode down to meet them. His name was Red Bear, and his reputation was known throughout the territory. He was a hunter and a fighter, and he did not like Apache. Red Bear looked at Naichi, took in her clothing, the way she moved, and his eyes hardened. "Apache woman," he said in rough English. "Good scalp. We take." Caleb stepped between them, his hands raised and empty. He spoke in Comanche, his words halting but understandable. "I am White Wolf, friend to many tribes. This woman is my wife. She goes to heal children. Please let us pass." Red Bear's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "White man marry Apache? You lie." Caleb reached slowly into his pack and pulled out the dream catcher. "This is proof. My wife, now gone, gave this to me. This woman is her sister." The lie came easily, necessary for survival. Naiche played along, lowering her head as if in grief. "My sister died. He is widowed. He is good." Red Bear examined the dream catcher. It was clearly authentic, clearly made by a medicine woman. His suspicion faded slightly, replaced by calculation. "We let you pass, but you give something. Trade." Caleb pulled out the elk hide from his pack, a pelt worth $50, money he had planned to use for winter supplies. "This, for safe passage." Red Bear examined the hide, tested its thickness and quality. He nodded slowly. "Deal." Then his expression became more serious. "But listen, White Wolf. Many cavalry between here and White Mountain. They look for Apache woman. They say big reward, $500. Caleb's blood ran cold. $500 was an enormous sum, more than most men made in 2 years. That kind of money meant Blackwood was not just pursuing Naiche out of duty or even revenge. This was personal, obsessive. "Why so much?" Caleb asked. Red Bear shrugged. "They say she kill officer. Blackwood's son." After Red Bear and his warriors rode away, Caleb turned to Naiche. "Did you kill Blackwood's son?" Her eyes were honest, pained. "No." I did not kill him, but I was there when he died. She told him the story as they walked. In 1876, Marcus Blackwood Jr. led a cavalry unit that attacked a small Apache gathering. Nietzsche had been there, treating an elderly woman. During the fight, a warrior named Largo shot an arrow in defense. The arrow struck Blackwood Jr. in the throat. He died within minutes. But before he died, Blackwood Jr. saw Nietzsche. He pointed at her, tried to speak, and a soldier heard him say, "That woman, she killed." Then he died. The soldier assumed Nietzsche had fired the arrow, but Largo had fired it, and Largo himself died 3 days later in another skirmish. There was no one left to tell the truth. "Blackwood believes I murdered his son," Nietzsche finished. "But I am a healer. I do not kill. I never have." Caleb believed her. He had seen enough killing to recognize killers, and Nietzsche was not one. But belief did not matter to Blackwood. The colonel had lost his son and found a target for his rage. Truth was irrelevant to grief that deep. They continued walking. An hour later, as they climbed a rocky slope, Caleb noticed something. Fresh blood on a stone, still wet. He stopped, signaling Nietzsche to stay quiet. They followed the blood trail 50 yards to a small cave. Inside, they found a body. An Apache scout, one of the men who worked for the cavalry. He had been tortured before he died. His fingernails were gone. Cuts covered his body. This was not combat. This was interrogation that had gone too far. Caleb searched the body, his face grim. In the scout's jacket he found a crumpled piece of paper, stained with blood. He unfolded it carefully and read aloud in the dim light. "Silver Creek, June 15, 50 Spencer rifles, $500 plus Santa Fe land deed, deliver to canyon entrance, no questions, signed MB." Nietzsche looked over his shoulder. "MB Marcus Blackwood. He is giving guns to Apache?" 50 Spencer rifles, Caleb said slowly, his mind working through the implications. "That's enough to arm an entire war party, if Apache have those guns and use them. Then cavalry has reason to attack everyone. Women, children, elders. They will say we started a war." "It's a trap," Caleb said. "A massive trap." They looked at each other, the weight of this discovery settling over them. This was bigger than one woman fleeing unjust accusations. This was bigger than Blackwood's revenge. This was a conspiracy that could lead to the deaths of hundreds, maybe thousands. "We have to warn the tribes," Nietzsche said. "If they take those guns, if they use them, Blackwood will have his excuse." "But first," Caleb said, "we still need the blue sage. 23 children can't wait." Nietzsche nodded. "White Mountain, then San Carlos. We have 6 days until June 15th. Then we need to move faster." They traveled through the afternoon and into the evening, pushing their exhausted bodies harder. By nightfall, they reached the foothills of White Mountain. The peak rose above them, 9,200 feet of limestone and pine. And somewhere near the summit, on the eastern face where the morning sun first touched the rock, grew the sacred blue sage. But Caleb's right leg was bothering him. During the escape through Dead Horse Canyon, he had cut it on a sharp rock. He had wrapped it quickly and ignored the pain. Now, 12 hours later, the wound was angry and hot. When Nietzsche saw blood seeping through his pant leg, she stopped immediately. "You are injured. Why did you not say?" "It's nothing. Sit down, now." Her voice carried the authority of a healer, and Caleb found himself obeying. Nietzsche examined the wound. It was a deep gash, 2 inches long, already showing signs of infection. The edges were red and swollen. If left untreated, it could lead to blood poisoning within days. She worked quickly, using water from their canteen to clean the wound. Then she pulled out some of the blue sage she had wrapped carefully in leather. She crushed the leaves into a paste, mixed it with other herbs from her pouch, and applied it directly to the cut. Caleb hissed through his teeth at the sting, but remained still. As she worked, her hands moved with practiced skill, gentle but sure. "My father used to say, The hands of a healer must be soft like water, but strong like stone. He was a good teacher. He was a good father. Her eyes grew wet, but she did not let the tears fall. She finished bandaging the wound with strips torn from her own sleeve, then sat back. "You should have told me earlier. Didn't want to slow us down. If you die from infection, we stop permanently." She looked at him with an expression between anger and fear. "If you die from this wound, I will never forgive you." Caleb looked at her, seeing the genuine concern in her face, and something shifted in his chest. "I won't die. I promise." "Do not promise what you cannot keep." "I will keep it." He met her eyes. "Because I can't let you go on alone." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Then Nietzsche looked away, toward the mountain rising above them in the darkness. "We should rest. Tomorrow we climb." They made a small fire, hidden in a depression between rocks, and ate dried venison while watching the stars wheel overhead. The silence between them was comfortable now, the silence of people who no longer need to fill every moment with words. Finally Nietzsche spoke. "Tell me about Zitkala." Caleb smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. "She laughed a lot. She taught me that life is not only suffering, there is joy, there is hope. You miss her?" "Every day." He paused, then added quietly, "She would have liked you." Nietzsche looked at him in the firelight. "How do you know?" "Because she saw the world the way you do. She believed that healing was stronger than hurting, that building was better than destroying." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I wish I had learned that lesson earlier, before Sand Creek, before I became part of the machine that kills." "You left that machine. That took courage. Or cowardice. I never knew which." Nietzsche reached out and placed her hand over his, a simple gesture that carried great weight. "Courage. A coward would have stayed where it was safe. You chose the hard path. You chose conscience over comfort." They sat like that for a moment, hands touching, two people from different worlds finding unexpected connection in the wilderness. Then Caleb cleared his throat and pulled his hand back gently, afraid of the feelings stirring in his chest after 3 years of numbness. "We should sleep. Tomorrow will be hard." They took turns keeping watch through the night. When dawn came, pink and gold over the eastern mountains, they began the ascent of White Mountain. The blue sage grew at 9,000 feet, on cliff faces too steep for casual climbing. Reaching it would require technical skill, nerve, and more than a little luck. Caleb led the way, using his knife to carve handholds where none existed. Behind him, Nietzsche climbed with surprising agility, her smaller size and lighter weight an advantage on the vertical face. They moved slowly, carefully, knowing that one mistake meant death. An hour into the climb, at about 8,500 feet, Caleb grabbed a rock that looked solid. It wasn't. The stone came loose in his hand with a grinding crack. He fell backward, 6 feet of empty air beneath him. His knife, still in his left hand, stabbed wildly at the cliff face. By sheer luck, the blade found a crack between 2 rocks and caught. Caleb jerked to a stop, hanging by one arm, his knife the only thing preventing a fatal fall. "Caleb!" Nietzsche's shout came from above. "I'm okay," he grunted, though his shoulder felt like it was being torn from its socket. "Keep climbing." Using every ounce of strength, he pulled himself up until he could get his feet back on solid rock. His hands were shaking, his heart pounding, but he forced himself to continue. There was no going back. Finally, after 2 hours of climbing, they reached a small ledge where the blue sage grew. 7 plants in total, their leaves a distinctive blue-green, their flowers the color of a summer sky. The morning sun illuminated them from behind, creating an almost supernatural glow. Nietzsche knelt before the plants with reverence. She spoke in Apache, a prayer of thanks to the earth for this gift. Then, with careful hands, she began to harvest. She took only 80% of each plant's leaves and flowers, leaving the roots and enough growth for the plants to survive and propagate. This was the way of the medicine woman. Take what is needed, but never more. As she worked, Caleb watched her face. In the golden morning light, covered in dust and exhaustion, she looked beautiful. Not in a simple physical way, though she was certainly that. Beautiful in the way a mountain is beautiful, strong, enduring, essential. When she finished, she wrapped the sage carefully in leather and tucked it into her pack. Then she looked up at Caleb, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled fully. A real smile that reached her eyes, that transformed her entire being. We did it. 23 children will live. Because of you, Caleb. Because of you, he corrected. You're the healer. I just helped you get here. We are partners, she said simply. Partners. The word settled on Caleb like a promise. He helped her stand, and for a moment they simply looked at each other on that high ledge, the world spread below them, the future uncertain but no longer quite so dark. Now, Nietzsche said, we must go to San Carlos. We must warn the tribes about the guns. Caleb nodded. 28 miles. We can make it by tomorrow morning if we push hard. They began the descent, moving carefully but with new purpose. They had accomplished the first goal. Now came the second, more dangerous part, preventing a massacre. As they climbed down, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distant ridge, a cavalry scout with a telescope tracking their movements, preparing to ride hard for Fort Stanton with news of their location. Colonel Blackwood would want to know that his prey was heading directly into the heart of Apache territory. The trap was closing, but Caleb and Nietzsche were walking into it with their eyes open, knowing the danger, choosing to face it anyway. Because some things were worth dying for. 23 children, hundreds of innocent people, the truth, and maybe, just maybe, each other. Part 3. Trials and Connections. The descent from White Mountain took 4 hours, each step a negotiation with gravity and exhaustion. By the time Caleb and Nietzsche reached the foothills, the sun was directly overhead, brutal and unforgiving. The temperature had climbed to 95 degrees, and their canteens were nearly empty. They found water at a small spring hidden among cottonwood trees, a place Nietzsche knew from childhood. As Caleb refilled their canteens, she noticed him favoring his right leg more than before. The bandage she had applied at dawn was showing fresh blood. "Let me see it," she said, her voice carrying that healer's authority that brooked no argument. Caleb sat on a flat rock without protest. His leg was worse than he wanted to admit. The wound had reopened during the climb, and despite Nietzsche's treatment, infection was setting in. The skin around the cut was hot to the touch, swollen, angry red spreading like fingers from the wound site. Nietzsche worked in silence, her face serious. She unwrapped the old bandage, cleaned the wound with water and whiskey that made Caleb's jaw clench, then applied more of the blue sage paste along with yarrow and willow bark. Her hands moved with certainty, the product of years of training under her father's guidance. "This should have been stitched," she said quietly. "But we have no needle, no thread. The herbs will have to be enough." "It'll be fine," Caleb said, though they both knew he was lying. "If it gets worse, if you develop fever, we will have to stop, no matter what. We can't stop, not with what we know about Blackwood's plan." Nietzsche looked up at him, and for the first time he saw genuine anger in her eyes. "You think I want to stop? You think I do not care about my people? But you are no good to anyone dead. A dead man saves no one." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Caleb nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry." She finished the bandaging, using the last of the cloth strips. "We rest here for 2 hours. The heat is too dangerous anyway. Then we move in the evening, travel through the night." They found shade beneath the cottonwoods and shared what little food remained. Dried venison, hard as leather, some pemmican that tasted of fat and berries. It wasn't much, but it was fuel, and fuel was all they needed. As they ate, Caleb asked the question that had been building in his mind. "Why did you become a healer instead of a warrior? You're strong enough, smart enough." Naichi was quiet for a long moment, chewing slowly, thinking. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of old pain. After my parents died, I wanted to be a warrior. I wanted revenge. I joined raiding parties. I killed 2 cavalry soldiers. She met his eyes. Does that shock you? No, Caleb said honestly. War is war. People defend themselves. But killing did not bring my parents back. It did not ease my pain. It only created more pain for their families, for mine. One night after a raid, I looked at my hands covered in blood, and I heard my father's voice in my head. He said, "Daughter, you can choose to destroy or to heal, but you cannot do both. What will you be?" So you chose healing. I chose life over death, building over destroying. It is harder, much harder, but it is the only way to break the cycle. Caleb nodded slowly. Your father was a wise man. He was. She paused, then added softly, I think he would have liked you. Why? Because you also chose. You walked away from the killing machine. That takes more courage than any battle. They rested in companionable silence as the afternoon heat peaked and then began to decline. At 4 o'clock, when the sun's angle made travel bearable, they set out again, heading southwest toward San Carlos. The landscape changed as they traveled. The mountains gave way to high desert, dotted with sagebrush and juniper. The soil turned red, then orange, then a pale tan. In the distance, heat shimmer made the horizon dance and waver like water. As evening approached, they spotted a small town in the valley below. 2 rivers, population maybe 200, the kind of settlement that appeared wherever there was water and people brave or desperate enough to claim it. A single main street, a dozen buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest. We need supplies, Caleb said. Food, ammunition, a rifle to replace the one I lost. And I know someone there who might help. A town of white people? That is dangerous for me. Sam Ridgway is a good man. I've known him for years. He doesn't judge people by their skin. They entered 2 rivers as the sun was setting, casting long shadows down the dusty street. A few people stared as they passed, seeing the strange pairing of a mountain man and an Apache woman. But no one challenged them. Not yet. Sam Ridgway's general store sat at the center of town, a sturdy building with large windows displaying goods from salt to saddles. When Caleb pushed open the door, a bell jingled overhead. The smell hit immediately. Leather, tobacco, coffee, soap, all mixed together in the distinctive perfume of commerce. Sam Ridgway stood behind the counter, a man of 68 with white hair, kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and the slightly stooped posture of someone who had spent decades bending over account books. When he saw Caleb, his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. Caleb Stone, been near a year since I saw you last. Sam, Caleb shook the older man's hand. I need your help. Sam's eyes moved to Naichi, taking her in with one practiced glance. Apache clothing, medicine pouch at her hip, the bearing of someone used to respect. His expression didn't change, didn't harden with prejudice. And who's this? Naichi, medicine woman of the Chiricahua Apache. Sam nodded respectfully. Medicine woman, that's an honorable profession. He looked back at Caleb. What kind of help? Caleb glanced around the store. It was empty except for the 3 of them. Still, he lowered his voice. The kind that might get you in trouble with the army. Sam's expression grew serious. Let me lock the door and turn the sign. Once the store was secured, Caleb told him everything. The rescue from Mackenzie, the flight through Dead Horse Canyon, the discovery about the guns, Blackwood's plan to arm the Apache and then use that as justification for a massacre. Sam listened without interrupting, his face growing graver with each revelation. When Caleb finished, Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice carried absolute certainty. Blackwood changed after his son died. The grief ate him up inside. But this goes beyond grief. This is evil. "Will you help us?" Nietzsche asked. Sam looked at her directly. "Miss, I've lived in this territory for 40 years. I've seen good people and bad people of every color, and I'll tell you true. If Caleb Stone vouches for you, that's enough for me. What do you need?" Relief flooded through Caleb. "Food, 2 good horses, ammunition, and when we come back, when we have proof, we'll need you to gather witnesses, people who will stand up and tell the truth. You'll have them." Sam moved behind his counter and began pulling supplies: hardtack, jerky, dried fruit, coffee. He filled 2 saddlebags without charging a cent. Then he pulled a Winchester rifle from behind the counter. "And here," he said, handing it to Caleb. "Can't have you facing trouble unarmed." Then he led them to the stable behind the store where he kept 2 strong horses, a bay gelding, and a gray mare. "These are good animals," Sam said, stroking the bay's neck. "They'll get you where you need to go." As Sam saddled the horses, a woman appeared in the stable doorway. Sarah Ridgway, Sam's daughter, 35 years old and widowed young. She had her father's kind eyes, but also a steel spine that came from running a boarding house in rough country. She looked at Nietzsche with frank curiosity, but no hostility. "Papa, you're giving away our best horses?" "For a good cause, Sarah girl." She studied Caleb and Nietzsche for a moment, then nodded. "Then you'll need this too." She handed Nietzsche a woolen shawl. "Gets cold at night in the desert." Nietzsche accepted it with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you." "No Apache woman should die of cold in my territory," Sarah said simply. "You come back safe, you hear? We'll be waiting to help however we can." As Caleb and Nietzsche prepared to leave, Sam pulled Caleb aside. "Be careful, son. Blackwood's not thinking straight. A man that deep in grief, he's capable of anything." "I know, but we have to try. You always did have more courage than sense." Sam gripped Caleb's shoulder. "God go with you." They rode out of 2 Rivers as night fell, heading south under a sky full of stars. The horses were fresh and strong, covering ground at a steady pace that would have been impossible on foot. By midnight, they had traveled 15 miles. By dawn, they would reach San Carlos. They stopped once to rest the horses and let them drink at a cattle tank. As Nietzsche checked the animals' legs for injuries, Caleb watched her work. Even exhausted, even facing impossible odds, she moved with purpose and grace. She was, he realized, the strongest person he had ever known. "What are you thinking?" she asked, catching him staring. "That I'm glad I met you." She smiled, a small expression in the moonlight. "I am glad you stepped out from behind that rock." 3 seconds, Caleb said quietly. "That's how long it took to decide. 3 seconds that changed everything. Perhaps those 3 seconds changed everything because they were meant to. Perhaps we were meant to meet." "You believe in fate?" "I believe in choices. You chose to help me. I chose to trust you. Those choices led us here. Call it fate or call it will. Either way, here we are." "Here we are," Caleb echoed. They rode on through the night. As the eastern sky began to lighten, they saw it on the horizon. San Carlos Reservation. Even from miles away, it looked like what it was: a prison. Rows of canvas tents, wooden barracks that seemed to sag under their own weight. Dust and desperation made visible. The reservation sat in a desert valley, one of the harshest environments in the territory. Summer temperatures reached 110 degrees. Water was scarce. The land produced almost nothing. It was, as one cavalry officer had once said, a place where you could starve an Apache without technically killing him. As they approached, Apache sentries materialized from the scrubland. Warriors on foot, armed with old rifles and bows. They recognized Nietzsche immediately. Word passed quickly. Within minutes, they were surrounded not by enemies, but by protectors. One warrior, A man named Chato, about 29 years old with fierce eyes and quick movements, stepped forward. "Nietzsche, we heard you were dead." "Not yet, Chato, but close." He looked at Caleb with suspicion. "This white man, is he your prisoner or your captor?" "He is my friend. He saved my life. More than once." The words carried weight. Among the Apache, to call someone friend was not done lightly. The warriors relaxed slightly, though they kept their weapons ready. "Come," Chato said. "Chief Victorio waits." They were led deeper into the reservation, past rows of tents where people emerged to watch them pass. Caleb saw children with swollen bellies from malnutrition, old people with the hollow look of those who had given up hope, women who held themselves with dignity despite having nothing. The sight made his chest tight with anger and grief. They were brought to a larger tent where the tribal leaders gathered. Chief Victorio sat in the center, 64 years old, his face a map of wrinkles earned through decades of war and survival. Beside him sat Geronimo, the famous resistance leader, 49 years old and still radiating a dangerous vitality despite the impossible circumstances. Nietzsche bowed respectfully. "Grandfather Victorio, Uncle Geronimo." Victorio's stern face softened slightly. "Nietzsche, daughter of Nazario, we thought you lost." "I was saved," she gestured to Caleb, "by White Wolf. He lived with the Jicarilla, married one of our people. He is a friend." Geronimo's sharp eyes assessed Caleb. "White Wolf, I have heard this name. You are the one who saved the Jicarilla women from the bounty hunters 2 years ago." Caleb nodded. "I did what was right." "What any decent man would do," Geronimo corrected. "But decent men are rare. Why have you come?" Nietzsche reached into her pack and pulled out the leather-wrapped blue sage. She handed it to an elderly medicine woman who had been hovering at the edge of the gathering. "For the 23 children. This will cure them." The medicine woman accepted it with trembling hands, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Thank you, daughter. Thank you." Mothers who had been watching from the tent entrance broke down crying, clutching each other. Their children would live. Against all odds, their children would live. But there was no time for celebration. Caleb pulled out the blood-stained paper they had found on the dead scout. "We found this. Blackwood is planning to give you 50 Spencer rifles. It's a trap." Victorio took the paper, read it slowly. His face darkened. "They want us to attack with these guns so they can kill us all." A young warrior standing near Chato spoke up angrily. "Or we could use the guns to actually fight, to defend ourselves. This is our chance." "No," Nietzsche said forcefully. "That is exactly what they want. If we fight, they will kill everyone. Elders, women, children. No one will survive." Caleb stepped forward. "She's right. A smart warrior chooses the right battle. This is not the right battle." Geronimo studied Caleb for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "White Wolf speaks truth. We must stop these guns from reaching us. But how?" "We need proof of the conspiracy," Caleb said. "We need to catch the gun runner, make him confess. Then we take that confession to 2 Rivers, make it public. If enough good white people see the truth, they will demand justice." Chato scoffed. "White people will never believe us." "They will believe other white people," Caleb said. "Sam Ridgway, Father Rodriguez, Doc Wilson. Good people who care about truth. If they witness the confession, if they stand with you, it changes everything." Victorio was quiet, thinking. Then he spoke with the authority of a man who had led his people through impossible times. "We will help you stop the guns, but we do this carefully. No unnecessary violence. We are not the savages they want us to be." Over the next 2 hours, they formed a plan. The gun shipment would arrive at Silver Creek on June 15th, 3 days away. Caleb, Nietzsche, Geronimo, and Chato would intercept it, capture the gun runners, force a confession. Meanwhile, Sam Ridgway would gather witnesses in 2 Rivers for a public hearing. It was risky. It required perfect timing. It required trusting that truth could overcome prejudice. But it was the only way to prevent a massacre. As the meeting broke up, Naichi went to check on the sick children. Caleb followed her to a tent where 23 small forms lay on blankets. Some were fevered, some barely breathing. But the medicine woman was already administering the blue sage tea, and even in that short time, some of the children's breathing had eased. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, opened her eyes as Naichi knelt beside her. "Are you an angel?" the child whispered in Apache. Naichi smiled, brushing the girl's hair back from her forehead. "No, little one. I am just a healer, but you will be well soon." The child smiled and closed her eyes, falling into what looked like the first peaceful sleep she had had in days. Caleb watched from the tent entrance, and something in his chest cracked open. This was why they were doing all of this. Not for grand principles or abstract justice. For this. For one little girl who deserved to grow up, to laugh, to live. When Naichi emerged from the tent, her eyes were wet, but her expression was determined. "Now we stop the guns. Now we save everyone else." "Together," Caleb said. "Together," she agreed. That night, they were given a small tent at the edge of the reservation to rest before the journey to Silver Creek. As Caleb lay on a blanket, staring at the canvas ceiling, he thought about the path that had led him here. From Sand Creek to the Jicarilla, to Zitkala, to desertion, to solitude, to this moment. Every choice building on the last, every decision narrowing or widening the possible futures. 3 days from now they would face Blackwood and his conspiracy. They might die, probably would die. But for the first time in 3 years, Caleb felt truly alive, because he had found something worth dying for. And lying a few feet away in the darkness, Naichi had found the same thing. 2 broken people from different worlds, healing each other simply by refusing to give up, refusing to let injustice stand, refusing to stop fighting for what was right. The wind whispered through the tent fabric, carrying with it the sound of a mother singing to her now healing child, the sound of hope, the sound of why they would risk everything in 3 days' time. And somewhere out in the darkness, Colonel Marcus Blackwood sat in his office at Fort Stanton, staring at a photograph of his dead son, planning his revenge, not knowing that the trap he had set was about to close on him instead. Part 4. Confrontation and Community. Fort Stanton, New Mexico Territory. 3 days before the gun delivery. Colonel Marcus Blackwood sat alone in his office, the lamp burning low on his desk, casting shadows that seemed to reach for him like accusing fingers. In his hands he held 2 things, a photograph and a letter. The photograph showed his son, Marcus Jr., 25 years old in his cavalry uniform, standing straight and proud. The boy had his mother's eyes, gentle eyes that seemed out of place in a soldier's face. The letter, yellowed now and creased from countless readings, was the last one his son had ever written. Blackwood's lips moved silently as he read words he had memorized long ago. "Father, I believe I am doing the right thing here. We protect the settlers. But sometimes I wonder if there is another way. I see Apache children. They look like any children. I do not want to harm them. But this is my duty. I love you. Marcus." His hand trembled. 2 years since that letter. 2 years since the arrow that took his boy. 2 years of rage eating him hollow from the inside out, until there was nothing left but the need for revenge. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come," he called, his voice rough. Samuel Creed entered, a man of 55 with the smooth face and expensive suit of someone who made money without getting his hands dirty. He represented the Santa Fe Mining Consortium, though Blackwood tried not to think too much about that. Tried not to think about how he had become a tool for men like Creed. "Colonel," Creed said, his voice carrying that oily politeness that wealthy men used when they wanted something. "I hear your men still haven't found the Apache woman. We'll find her. I'm sure you will. And when you do, justice will be served." Creed moved to the window, looking out at the fort grounds. "Speaking of justice, the gun shipment arrives at Silver Creek on the 15th. Everything is arranged." Blackwood felt something twist in his gut. "Remind me why we're arming them again?" Creed turned, his smile patient, as if explaining to a child. "We're not arming them, Colonel. We're giving them the rope to hang themselves. When they use those rifles, when they attack innocent settlers, you'll have the justification you need. The authorization from Washington. No more restrictions. No more treaty obligations. And then? And then the Apache problem is solved. The land is opened for development. The consortium gets its mineral rights. You get your revenge. Everyone wins. Except the Apache. They made their choice when they killed your son, Colonel. This is justice." Blackwood looked back at the photograph. Was it justice? Or was it just murder dressed up in pretty words? His son's face stared back at him, those gentle eyes that had questioned duty, that had seen Apache children as children. "Colonel Blackwood," Creed said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "you're not having second thoughts, are you? Because if you are, I should remind you that you've already signed documents that could be very damaging if certain people saw them." The threat was clear. Blackwood had sold his soul, and now the devil wouldn't let him buy it back. He straightened in his chair, his face hardening into the mask he wore for the world. "No second thoughts. The plan proceeds as arranged." "Good." Creed moved toward the door. "3 more days, Colonel. Then you get what you want. Then your son is avenged." After Creed left, Blackwood sat in the darkness, looking at his son's photograph, wondering when he had stopped being a soldier and become a monster, wondering if his son would recognize him anymore, wondering if he recognized himself. But it was too late for wondering. The machine was in motion. Blood would answer blood. That was the only law that mattered now. 200 miles south at San Carlos Reservation, Caleb and Naiche were preparing for the journey to Silver Creek. Geronimo and Chato would ride with them, along with 2 other warriors. 6 people to stop a convoy of armed gun runners. The odds were not good. Caleb was checking his weapons when Naiche approached. She had changed into riding clothes, practical and worn, but she moved with that same grace that had caught his attention from the beginning. In the 3 days since arriving at San Carlos, something had shifted between them. Not spoken, not acknowledged, but present nonetheless. A connection that went deeper than friendship, though neither dared name it. "Your leg," she said, crouching beside him. "How is it?" "Better. Your medicine worked." She examined it anyway, unwrapping the bandage with practiced hands. The wound was healing cleanly now, the angry redness faded to pink. The infection had been stopped just in time. "Good, but you should not ride hard for another week." "Don't have a week." "I know." She rewrapped it with fresh cloth. As she worked, she spoke quietly. "Caleb, if this goes wrong tomorrow, if we do not survive, I want you to know something." He looked down at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. "What?" "You gave me back my faith in people, in the possibility that different worlds can touch without destroying each other. That is a gift I can never repay." Caleb's throat tightened. "You gave me the same thing. You reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for, worth dying for, if it comes to that." Their eyes held for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Then Naiche stood, the moment broken but not forgotten. "We should rest. Tomorrow will be hard." That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He stood outside the tent, looking up at the stars, thinking about the strange path his life had taken. From that moment, 14 years ago at Sand Creek, to this moment now, preparing to face down a conspiracy that could lead to the deaths of hundreds. If someone had told him a month ago that he would be here, risking everything for people he barely knew, he would have laughed. But now, it seemed like the only possible choice. Footsteps behind him. Geronimo emerged from the darkness, moving with the silence of a lifetime warrior. The famous leader looked at Caleb for a long moment before speaking. "White Wolf, I have a question." "Ask it." "Why do you do this? You could ride away. Go back to your mountain. Be safe. Why risk your life for people who are not your own?" Caleb was quiet, thinking about the question. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won understanding. Because they are my own. Not by blood, maybe, but by choice. And choice matters more than blood ever did. Geronimo nodded slowly. You sound like Apache. We have a saying, family is not who you are born to, but who you would die to protect. Then I guess I'm more Apache than white. No, Geronimo said, and there was respect in his voice. You are both, and that is your strength. You can walk in two worlds. That is rare. That is needed. He placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, a gesture of brotherhood, then disappeared back into the night. Caleb stood alone again, but somehow less lonely than he had been in 3 years. The next morning they rode out before dawn, 6 riders heading northwest toward Silver Creek. The landscape was harsh, all red rock and thorny plants, but there was a savage beauty to it. This was land that didn't forgive weakness, didn't tolerate mistakes. It was honest in its brutality, and Caleb had always appreciated that honesty. They reached Silver Creek by midday and found a good position in the rocks overlooking the canyon entrance where the gun delivery was supposed to happen. Then they waited. Waiting was always the hardest part. Time to think, time to doubt, time to imagine all the ways things could go wrong. Caleb found himself watching Naichi as she checked her rifle, as she spoke quietly with Chato, as she read the landscape with practiced attention. When had she become so essential to him? When had the thought of losing her become unbearable? You stare at her like a lovesick boy, Chato said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Caleb jerked his attention back. I'm keeping watch. On her, yes. On the canyon, not so much. Chato's fierce face softened slightly. She is worthy of such attention. She has the strength of 10 warriors, but also the heart of a healer. That is rare. It is, Caleb agreed quietly. If we survive this, you should tell her how you feel. Life is too short for silence. Before Caleb could respond, Geronimo hissed a warning. In the distance, dust rose. The convoy was coming. 3 wagons appeared, moving slowly down the canyon road. Each wagon was covered with canvas and drawn by a team of 4 horses. Riding alongside were 8 armed men, civilian gun runners with the hard look of men who had killed before and would kill again. Leading them was Samuel Creed himself, sitting on a fine black horse that cost more than most men made in a year. 8 guards, 3 drivers, Geronimo whispered. 11 men. We are 6. Then we need to be smarter, Caleb said, not stronger. The plan was simple in concept, difficult in execution. They would let the wagons enter the narrow part of the canyon, then block both exits. Trapped, the gun runners would have to negotiate. Caleb was betting that men like Creed valued their lives more than their profits. It almost worked. The wagons entered the narrows. Geronimo and 2 warriors blocked the exit with a rock slide they had prepared earlier. Caleb, Naichi, and Chato blocked the entrance. The gun runners found themselves boxed in, with Apache warriors above them on the canyon walls. Creed's face went from confident to terrified in the space of a heartbeat. Don't shoot! We're just businessmen. We have rights. So did the people you planned to murder, Caleb called down. Throw down your weapons, all of them, now. For a moment, it looked like they would comply. The guards were looking at each other nervously, seeing the rifles pointed at them from above, calculating odds that didn't favor survival. Then one guard, younger and dumber than the rest, went for his pistol. He died before the gun cleared its holster, a bullet from Chato's rifle dropping him where he stood. The canyon erupted in chaos. Guards dove for cover, horses screamed and reared, shots echoed off the rock walls. Caleb aimed for wagon wheels, not men. The goal was to stop them, not kill them. But the guards weren't so discriminating. Bullets whined off rocks, sending stone chips flying. Naichi pressed flat against a boulder, returning fire with careful precision. Each shot counted, none wasted. The fight lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes of smoke and noise and terror. When it ended, 5 guards were dead, 2 wounded, and the rest had thrown down their weapons and raised their hands. Creed himself was cowering behind a wagon wheel, his expensive suit covered in dust and his face white with fear. Geronimo and his warriors secured the prisoners while Caleb and Nietzsche examined the wagons. Under the canvas were crates stamped with army markings. Inside the crates, 50 Spencer rifles, new and gleaming, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Enough firepower to start a war. Enough to justify ending one. They dragged Creed out from his hiding place. Up close, he looked smaller, older, more pathetic. This was the man who had orchestrated a plan to murder hundreds. This was the architect of genocide, and he looked like a frightened clerk who had gambled and lost. "Please," Creed whimpered. "I was just following orders. I never meant for... It was Blackwood's idea." "Tell me everything," Caleb said, his voice cold as mountain ice. "Every detail. Who planned this? Who paid for it? Why?" And Creed talked. Fear loosened his tongue like wine, and the story spilled out. The Santa Fe Mining Consortium wanted the land. Blackwood wanted revenge. Together, they had created a plan. Arm the Apache, wait for them to attack, then use that attack as justification for total extermination. The consortium got rich. Blackwood got his vengeance. Everyone won. Except the Apache. Nietzsche stood listening, her face a mask of controlled fury. When Creed finished, she spoke, and her voice carried a cold contempt that made even the hardened gun runners flinch. "You plan to murder children, elders, people who have done nothing to you, for money." "It was business," Creed whimpered. "Just business." "No," Nietzsche said. "This is evil. Simple, undeniable evil." They tied Creed and the surviving guards to their horses, confiscated the weapons, and began the journey back to Two Rivers. It was time for the truth to be told in public. Time for justice. The ride to Two Rivers took 6 hours. They arrived as the sun was setting, the sky painted orange and purple and red, like the land itself was on fire. Word of their coming had spread ahead somehow, carried by riders or whispers, or that mysterious way news travels in the territory. By the time they reached the main street, half the town had gathered. Sam Ridgway stood on the steps of the town hall waiting. Beside him were Father Miguel Rodriguez, the town priest, a man of 55 with kind eyes and steel in his spine. Doc Wilson, the local physician, 62 years old and respected by everyone. And Sarah Ridgway, Sam's daughter, standing tall and unafraid. But also waiting, with 20 cavalry soldiers arranged behind him, was Colonel Marcus Blackwood. The two groups faced each other across the dusty street. The entire town held its breath. This was the moment everything could go right or collapse into bloodshed. Blackwood's eyes fixed on Nietzsche, and the hatred there was palpable, a living thing. "That woman murdered my son. I demand she be turned over to military custody immediately." "No," Sam Ridgway said, his voice calm but firm. "Not until we hear the truth. All of it. The truth is she's a murderer." "Then let us have a hearing." Father Rodriguez stepped forward, his priest's collar catching the last light of day. "A public hearing, where all evidence is presented, where witnesses speak, where justice, real justice, is served." Blackwood's face twisted with rage. "I don't need a hearing. I have authority here." "Not over civilians on civilian land," Sam said. "This is Two Rivers, Colonel, not Fort Stanton. And here, we believe in truth." The crowd murmured agreement. More townspeople had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Caleb saw farmers, shopkeepers, cowboys, women holding children, ordinary people watching extraordinary events unfold. "People of Two Rivers," Caleb called out, his voice carrying across the street. "We have proof of a conspiracy, a plan to arm the Apache and then use that as an excuse to exterminate them. Men, women, and children. Hundreds of innocent people." He gestured to Creed, still tied on his horse, looking sick with fear. "This man will confess. He'll tell you everything. About the mining consortium, about the plan, about who was behind it. Blackwood went pale. That man is a criminal. You can't believe anything he says. Then let him speak and let the people judge, Father Rodriguez said. Unless you have something to hide, Colonel. The trap was closing. Blackwood could see it in the faces around him. These were his own people, the settlers he claimed to protect, and they wanted to hear the truth. If he tried to shut this down by force, he would lose them forever. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. Let's have your hearing. They moved inside the town hall, a simple building with wooden benches and a raised platform at one end. The room filled quickly, people pressing in, standing along the walls, crowding the doorway. The air was thick with tension and body heat and the sense that something momentous was happening. Sam Ridgway acted as judge, standing on the platform with Father Rodriguez and Doc Wilson on either side as witnesses. Creed was brought forward, his hands still bound, and then, with the entire town watching, he confessed. He told them about the mining consortium, about the millions of dollars in silver deposits under Apache land, about how they needed the Apache gone to access those deposits, about approaching Blackwood, exploiting his grief, manipulating his pain into a weapon. The colonel wanted revenge, Creed said, his voice shaking. We wanted profit. So we made a deal. Arm the Apache. Wait for them to attack. Then the army would have justification for total removal. Everyone gets what they want. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps, curses. A woman started crying. These were people who had lost neighbors to Apache raids, who had lived in fear for years. But they were also people with consciences. And this was beyond the pale. That's a lie, Blackwood roared, standing up. This man is lying to save his own skin. Caleb pulled out the blood-stained document, the one they had found on the dead scout. This is signed M.B. Marcus Blackwood, your signature, Colonel, on a contract to deliver 50 rifles to Silver Creek. Blackwood looked at the paper, and something in his face cracked. He seemed to age 10 years in an instant. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. I never meant. I just wanted justice for my son. Nietzsche stood then, and every eye in the room turned to her. She walked slowly to the center of the room, standing where everyone could see her. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong and absolutely without fear. Colonel Blackwood, I did not kill your son. I was there when he died, yes. I saw the arrow that struck him. But it was not my arrow. It was shot by a warrior named Largo, who was defending his people. Largo died 3 days later in another fight. He cannot speak for himself. But I can speak truth. I am a healer, not a killer. I have never taken a life. I only save them. She paused, looking directly at Blackwood, and her next words carried a weight of compassion that made them even more powerful. You lost your son. I lost my father and mother, killed in a cavalry raid. I understand your pain. I know that grief. But pain cannot be an excuse to create more pain. Your son, in his last letter to you, said he did not want to hurt Apache children. He saw us as human. Would he want this? Would he want you to become the thing you think you are fighting? The room was absolutely silent. Blackwood stood there, trembling, staring at this Apache woman who should be his enemy, but spoke to him with more understanding than anyone had in 2 years. Finally, he broke. His legs gave out and he sank to his knees, and a sound came from him that was barely human, a wail of grief and guilt and recognition. He pulled a photograph from his jacket, his son's face, and held it like a talisman. He wouldn't want this, Blackwood whispered. Marcus wouldn't want any of this. He wrote me, he said. He said he didn't want to hurt children. And I used his death to justify murdering children. I became the monster I thought I was fighting. He looked up at Nietzsche, tears streaming down his weathered face. I'm sorry. God forgive me, I'm sorry. I let my pain turn me into something evil. I let them use me. I let them use my boy's memory to justify genocide. Nietzsche knelt down beside him, and in front of the entire town she placed her hand on his shoulder. I forgive you. she said simply. "And I think wherever your son is, he forgives you too. But now you must stop this. You must make it right." Blackwood nodded, unable to speak. Sam Ridgway stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Colonel, will you testify against the mining consortium? Will you expose this conspiracy fully?" "Yes," Blackwood choked out. "Yes, I'll tell them everything." The room erupted, people talking, arguing, processing what they had just witnessed. But gradually, a consensus formed. One by one, townspeople stood up. Sam, Father Rodriguez, Doc Wilson, Sarah Ridgway, then farmers and merchants and cowboys, common people with common decency. "We stand with Naichi," Sam said. "She is innocent, more than innocent. She is a hero. She risked her life to save children and to stop a massacre." Father Rodriguez nodded. "In the eyes of God and this community, we proclaim that Naichi, medicine woman of the Chiricahua Apache, is under our protection. Anyone who harms her answers to all of us." The declaration rippled through the crowd. 30 people, then 40, then 50, all standing in solidarity. White people, settlers, the very people who were supposed to fear and hate the Apache, standing up for one Apache woman because she represented something they believed in. Truth. Justice. Basic human decency. Caleb watched it happen, and something in his chest expanded. This was what he had hoped for but barely dared to believe in. That ordinary people, when given truth instead of lies, would choose right over wrong. That courage was contagious. That one person standing up could inspire others to stand. Naichi looked around the room, seeing the faces of people who an hour ago she would have called enemies, now calling her friend. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "Thank you, all of you. You show me that there is hope, that our worlds can touch without destroying each other, that we can build instead of break. Thank you." Outside, the sun had fully set, but inside that town hall, in that small room in a nowhere town in New Mexico territory, a different kind of light had been kindled, the light of people choosing to be better than their fears, the light of justice, hard-won and precious, the light of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. And at the back of the room, young Timothy in the year 1917 listened with held breath as old Caleb told the story, teaching him that moments like these, small moments in small towns with ordinary people doing extraordinary things, those were the moments that actually changed the world. Part 5. The Council of Justice. The town hall meeting didn't end that night. It transformed. What had begun as a confrontation became something else entirely, something unprecedented in the territory's blood-soaked history. A gathering of conscience. A moment when ordinary people decided that right mattered more than fear, that truth mattered more than convenience. Sam Ridgway took control with the calm authority of a man who had spent decades settling disputes over fence lines and water rights. "Folks, we need to make this official. We need a statement, signed by witnesses, that can go to the territorial governor and to Washington itself." Father Rodriguez produced paper and ink from somewhere. Doc Wilson, whose hands were steadier than any man's in the territory despite his 62 years, took on the role of scribe. And slowly, methodically, they began to document everything. Creed's confession, Blackwood's admission, the conspiracy, the evidence. Caleb stood at the back of the room with Naichi beside him, watching democracy happen in real time. It was messy. People argued over wording. Some wanted harsher language. Others worried about legal technicalities. But through it all, there was a current of determination. These people had seen evil laid bare, and they refused to look away. "You did this," Caleb said quietly to Naichi. "You made them see." She shook her head. "We did this. You, me, Sam, everyone here. One person cannot change the world, but many people choosing the same thing, that can change everything. Outside, the cavalry soldiers stood uncertain. Their commander had just confessed to conspiracy. Their orders had evaporated. A young lieutenant approached Caleb, his face troubled. "Sir, what should we do? The colonel, I don't know what our duty is anymore." Caleb looked at the young man, seeing echoes of himself at that age, confused and trying to do right in a world where right was rarely clear. "Your duty is to the truth, son, not to any one man. Stay here, bear witness, make sure justice is done." The lieutenant nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. That makes sense." As midnight approached, the document was finished. 27 people signed it as witnesses, including Blackwood himself, his signature shaky but legible. Sam read the final version aloud to the assembled crowd, and when he finished, the room erupted in applause. Not celebration exactly, something more solemn, recognition that they had done something important, something that mattered. But Nietzsche knew the work was not finished. She stood again, waiting for the room to quiet. "There is still the matter of the guns, 50 rifles. They must not reach any Apache band, but they also should not stay with the army, not after this." "What do you suggest?" Sam asked. "Destroy them, melt them down, turn weapons of war into tools of peace." Doc Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "The blacksmith, Tom Morgan, he's got a forge hot enough to do it. We could start tomorrow." "Do it public," Sarah Ridgway added. "Let people see. Let it mean something." The motion passed by acclamation. Tomorrow, the guns would be destroyed. Tonight, they would celebrate not with revelry, but with the quiet satisfaction of people who had done right. As the meeting finally broke up, Caleb found Blackwood sitting alone on the steps outside, staring at nothing. The colonel looked hollow, emptied out. Caleb sat down beside him without asking permission. "I destroyed everything," Blackwood said. "My career, my reputation, my son's memory." "No," Caleb said firmly. "You saved your son's memory. That letter you read, about not wanting to hurt children, that was the real Marcus. Today, you honored him. It doesn't bring him back. Nothing brings them back. I know. I lost people too." Caleb thought of Zitkala, of the Cheyenne at Sand Creek, of all the ghosts that haunted him. "But we can choose what we do with our grief. We can let it make us into monsters, or we can let it make us into better men. You chose better. Late. But you chose." Blackwood was quiet for a long time. Then, almost inaudibly, he whispered, "Thank you." Inside, Nietzsche was surrounded by townspeople wanting to talk to her, to shake her hand, to apologize for years of fear and prejudice. She handled it with grace, accepting their words without making them grovel, offering forgiveness without being asked. Sarah Ridgway brought her coffee and a plate of food, sitting beside her like they were old friends. "You're braver than any 10 men I know," Sarah said, "standing up there, speaking truth to a man who wanted you dead. That took more courage than I can imagine." "I was terrified," Nietzsche admitted, "but fear cannot be an excuse for silence. My father taught me that." "Your father was wise." "He was. I wish he could have seen this, seen white people and Apache people sitting together, talking, choosing peace." Nietzsche smiled sadly. "He always believed it was possible. I stopped believing. But tonight, you all gave me back that belief." Geronimo and Chato had remained outside with the horses, not entirely trusting this sudden outbreak of peace. Caleb went to brief them on what had happened. The warriors listened carefully, their expressions skeptical. "Words are cheap," Chato said. "White men have given us words before, treaties, promises, all broken." "This is different," Caleb said. "These aren't politicians in Washington making promises they don't have to keep. These are neighbors. They put their names on paper. They made it public. If they break this, they break it in front of each other. That matters." Geronimo nodded slowly. "Perhaps. We will see. But White Wolf, this is a start. More than we have had before. You and Nietzsche, you built a bridge. Whether others cross it, time will tell. The night finally ended near dawn. Caleb and Naichi were given rooms at Sarah's boarding house. Clean beds, hot water for washing, luxuries they had almost forgotten existed. As Caleb lay down, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion, he realized he hadn't slept in a real bed in 3 years. The cabin had a bed frame, but he usually fell asleep in his chair by the fire, unable to face the emptiness of sheets meant for two. But tonight, sleep didn't come easily despite the exhaustion. His mind kept replaying the evening. The moment Naichi stood up to speak. The moment Blackwood broke. The moment the town chose justice. Over and over, like a lantern show, the images flickering through his consciousness. A soft knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Naichi stood in the hallway, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. "I cannot sleep," she said simply. "Neither can I." They went downstairs to the boarding house parlor, where the embers of the evening fire still glowed. Sitting in comfortable chairs, wrapped in the gentle silence of pre-dawn, they talked. Really talked, for the first time without urgency or danger pressing at their backs. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked. "After this is over?" Naichi considered the question. "San Carlos needs healers. The children need care. There is work for me there." "That's a hard life. The reservation, it's not meant for living. It's meant for dying slowly." "I know, but my people are there. I cannot abandon them." Caleb nodded, understanding but feeling a hollow opening in his chest. Of course she would return to her people. Of course she would choose duty over anything else. That was who she was. "And you?" she asked. "Back to your mountain?" He thought about the cabin, the solitude, the endless empty days. A week ago it had seemed like all he wanted. Now it seemed like a prison. "I suppose so. It's all I have." "It is not all you have." She looked at him with an understanding that went beyond words. "You have friends now, in Two Rivers, at San Carlos. You have me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Caleb's throat felt tight. "I'm nearly 40 years old. I live in a cabin in the mountains. I have nothing to offer anyone. You have yourself. That is everything. I'm broken, Naichi. Sand Creek broke me. Losing Zitkala broke me. I'm not whole enough to be what anyone needs." She leaned forward, her expression fierce. "You are the strongest man I know. You saved me. You stood against injustice when it would have been easier to walk away. You built bridges between enemies. That is not broken. That is whole." "Then why do I feel like I'm held together with spit and wire?" "Because healing takes time. Because scars remain even when wounds close. Because being whole does not mean being undamaged. It means being functional despite the damage." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw reflected in her eyes what he was feeling but afraid to name. Want. Need. The possibility of something beyond survival. The possibility of living instead of merely existing. "Naichi, I—" The words died as the door burst open. Sam Ridgway stood there, his face grave. "You need to come. Now. There's trouble." They followed Sam into the pre-dawn darkness. A crowd had gathered in the town square. At the center, tied to a post, was one of Creed's surviving gunrunners. And surrounding him were 5 men on horses, wearing the masks of vigilantes. The leader, a rancher named Pike, who owned land north of town, pointed at the prisoner. "This man conspired to arm hostiles. He's guilty of treason. We're here to carry out justice." "This is not justice, it's murder," Sam said firmly. "We have legal process now. Territorial marshals are coming. This man will face trial. Trials take months, cost money. We handle it now the frontier way." Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Pike and the prisoner. "The frontier way? Is that what we're calling lynch mobs now?" "Stay out of this, Stone. You helped that Apache woman, but this is different. This is white man's business." "No." Father Rodriguez appeared from the church across the square. Despite the early hour, he wore his full vestments, his collar stark white in the lamplight. "This is God's business, and God says thou shalt not kill." "The padre can quote scripture all day," Pike sneered. "Won't change facts. This man helped arm savages. He deserves to hang." More townspeople were gathering now, woken by the commotion. Caleb saw the moment teetering on a knife edge. Everything they had accomplished last night could evaporate if Pike succeeded. Fear would win, violence would win, and the bridge they had built would collapse before anyone could cross it. Nietzsche moved to stand beside Caleb. "This man is a criminal, yes, but he confessed. He told truth. And because of that truth, hundreds of lives were saved. Does that count for nothing?" "Coming from an Apache, that's rich," Pike shot back. "Your people have killed plenty of innocents." "Yes," Nietzsche said, and her honesty shocked the crowd into silence. "My people have killed, and your people have killed, and each side points at the other and says, they started it, they deserve it. When does it end? When does someone say, not today, today we choose different?" Pike seemed shaken, but he held his ground. "Pretty words don't change what he is." "No," Sam Ridgway said, stepping forward with a rifle in his hands, not pointing it at anyone, just holding it. "But this does. Pike, you want to hang this man, you'll have to go through me, and the padre, and Doc Wilson." The doctor appeared, also armed. "And my daughter." Sarah Ridgway stood on the church steps, a shotgun cradled in her arms. One by one, townspeople stepped forward. The blacksmith, the general store clerk, the banker, the saloon keeper, 20 people, then 30, not all of them. Some in the crowd clearly sided with Pike, but enough. Enough to make Pike see that his vigilante justice would mean civil war in Two Rivers. The standoff lasted 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. Finally, Pike spat into the dust and jerked his horse's head around. "You're all making a mistake. You'll regret this." He and his men rode off into the gray dawn. The prisoner sagged against his ropes, sobbing with relief. Sam cut him loose and handed him over to the young cavalry lieutenant, who accepted custody with visible nervousness. The crowd dispersed slowly, people talking in low voices, processing what had just happened. Twice in 12 hours, the town had been forced to choose. Both times, they had chosen right. But it had been close. The margins were thin, the future uncertain. Caleb found himself shaking slightly, adrenaline draining away. Nietzsche touched his arm, steadying him. "You did well. We did well. All of us." He looked around at the townspeople returning to their homes as sunrise painted the eastern sky. Sam, Father Rodriguez, Doc Wilson, Sarah, they stood up. That's what matters. "It is the beginning," Nietzsche said. "Only the beginning. But every journey starts with one step." Later that morning, as promised, the guns were destroyed. Tom Morgan the blacksmith set up his forge in the town square. One by one, the 50 Spencer rifles were broken down, the barrels bent in his massive vise, the stocks smashed, the mechanisms melted into shapeless lumps of metal. It took all day. The entire town watched in shifts, bearing witness. As the last rifle was destroyed, Sam read aloud the statement that had been prepared, the one that would go to Santa Fe and Washington. It detailed the conspiracy, named names, called for investigation and reform. 27 signatures testified to its truth. "This document," Sam said, his voice carrying across the square, "represents a promise that Two Rivers will stand for justice, that we will not let fear make us into monsters, that we believe in a future where different people can live side by side in peace. God willing, this is our legacy." The crowd, perhaps 200 people now, applauded. Not everyone agreed. Caleb could see dissent in some faces, but enough agreed, enough to matter, enough to make change possible. That evening there was a dinner at the church. Father Rodriguez insisted. "We must break bread together," he said. "White and Apache, strangers becoming neighbors. This is how we make peace real." Tables were set up outside as the summer evening cooled. People brought food, roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from gardens, apple pie. And from the reservation, Apache women brought pemmican and fry bread and venison stew. The smells mingled in the air, different traditions meeting, merging, creating something new. Caleb sat with Naichi, Sam, Sarah, and Father Rodriguez. Around them conversations hummed. Awkward at first, then warming. A rancher asking an Apache man about tracking techniques. An Apache woman showing a settler's wife how to tan leather properly. Small connections, small bridges. "This is what hope looks like," Father Rodriguez said, gesturing at the gathering. "Not perfect, not easy, but possible." As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, someone produced a fiddle. Music started. Then someone else had a drum. Apache rhythm met frontier melody, and impossibly, beautifully, they found harmony. People began to dance, self-conscious at first, then with growing joy. Caleb watched it all, this fragile miracle, and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not quite happiness. Too much had happened. Too much pain remained for simple happiness. But something close to it. Hope, maybe. The sense that despite everything, despite all the darkness and cruelty, human beings could still choose light. "Dance with me," Naichi said suddenly. Caleb blinked. "I don't dance." "Neither do I. But tonight, let us try something new." They stood, moving to the space where others were dancing. Caleb had no idea what he was doing, moving stiffly to music that seemed to have no pattern he could follow. Naichi laughed at his awkwardness, and that laugh was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. "You are terrible at this," she said, her eyes sparkling in the lantern light. "Told you. But I like that you try anyway." They swayed together, not quite dancing, not quite standing still, finding their own rhythm that matched neither the fiddle nor the drum, but something else entirely. And in that moment, surrounded by people who hours ago had been enemies and were now something else, something better, Caleb felt Zitkala's memory settle into its proper place. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but no longer the only thing defining him. "Naiche," he said quietly, so only she could hear over the music. "When this is over, when things settle, I don't want to go back to being alone." "Neither do I. I don't know what that means. I don't know what's possible." "We will find out together," she said simply. And that was enough. For now, in this moment, with music playing and lanterns glowing and people of different worlds choosing to see each other as human, that was enough. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually people drifted home. Families to their houses, Apache visitors to their camp outside town. Caleb and Naichi walked back to the boarding house through quiet streets, the stars impossibly bright overhead. "Tomorrow we must return to San Carlos," Naichi said. "The children will need more treatment, and the people need to hear what happened here." "I'll ride with you, if you want." "I want." They paused outside the boarding house. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Caleb wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and never let go. But something held him back. Fear, maybe. Or the memory of promises made to someone else. Or just the knowledge that some things needed time, needed patience, needed to grow naturally rather than being forced. Naichi seemed to understand. She touched his cheek gently, a gesture that held more tenderness than any kiss. "Good night, Caleb Stone." "Good night, Naichi." They parted, going to their separate rooms. But Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrows, thinking about possibilities, thinking about a cabin on a mountain that could be expanded to hold 2 people instead of 1, thinking about a future that had seemed impossible a week ago and now seemed inevitable. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched empires rise and fall, that had seen endless human cruelty and occasional human grace. And on this night, in this small town in the middle of nowhere, they witnessed something rare and precious. People choosing to be better than their fears. People building instead of breaking. People finding hope in the ruins of old hatreds. It was a small thing, this gathering in Two Rivers, just a few dozen people making a choice. But small things have a way of spreading. A candle lighting other candles, a story being retold, inspiring others to tell their own stories. A bridge built between enemies, showing that other bridges are possible. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world. Not grand gestures or sweeping declarations, just ordinary people, in an ordinary town, on an ordinary evening, choosing extraordinary decency. That, and the stubborn refusal of one mountain man and one Apache healer to accept that hatred, was the only possible ending to their story. Part 6. Justice and Legacy. The territorial marshal arrived in Two Rivers 3 days later, a weathered man named Clayton who had seen every variety of frontier crime and developed a bone-deep weariness as a result. He read the signed statement, interviewed witnesses, examined the evidence, and his expression grew darker with each passing hour. "This goes all the way to Santa Fe," he told Sam Ridgway in the privacy of the general store office. "Mining consortium, territorial politicians, maybe even people in Washington. You've kicked over a hornet's nest." "Will there be justice?" Sam asked. Clayton was quiet for a long moment. "There will be trials. Convictions, probably. Creed will hang or spend his life breaking rocks. The consortium executives will lose everything. Blackwood," he paused, "Blackwood cooperated fully. That counts for something. He'll be dishonorably discharged, lose his pension, but he won't hang. And the Apache? What happens to them?" "That's above my authority. But I'll recommend to the territorial governor that San Carlos be improved. Better conditions, more food, medical care, and," he looked directly at Sam, "I'll recommend that any Apache who testified or helped prevent this massacre be given full protection under law, including the woman, Naichi." Sam nodded, satisfied. "That's all we can ask." But Marshal Clayton's face remained troubled. "You understand what you've done here? You've proven that white people and Indians can work together. That's dangerous to some folks, dangerous to the way things have always been. There will be consequences." "Let them come," Sam said quietly. "We'll face them, together." Caleb and Naichi had stayed in Two Rivers during the marshal's investigation, giving testimony, answering questions. But as the official business concluded, they both felt the pull to move on. San Carlos needed Naichi's healing skills, and Caleb was still figuring out where he belonged. On their last evening in town, Sarah Ridgway hosted a quiet dinner at the boarding house. Just the core group: Sam, Sarah, Father Rodriguez, Doc Wilson, Caleb, and Naichi. They sat around a table laden with simple food and talked about what came next. "The statement goes to Santa Fe tomorrow," Sam said, "along with the marshal's report. Within a month, this will reach Washington. There will be investigations, reforms, maybe even congressional hearings." "Will it change anything?" Naichi asked, her voice carrying a lifetime's worth of skepticism. Doc Wilson, who had been quiet most of the evening, spoke up. "My grandfather fought in the Revolution, not the famous battles. Just a farmer who picked up a rifle when the British came through. He told me once, revolutions don't happen in a day. They happen in 1,000 small moments when ordinary people choose to stand up. What happened here, this is one of those moments." Father Rodriguez nodded. "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, the smallest of seeds, but it grows into the largest of plants. What we planted here will grow. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but it will grow." Sarah looked at Naichi with genuine affection. "You changed this town. You changed us. Before you came, we were afraid. Now we're awake. We see what's possible." "I did not do this alone," Naichi said. "We all did this. That is the lesson. One person cannot change the world, but many people, each making one choice, that changes everything." After dinner, Caleb walked Naichi back to her room. They paused in the hallway, the lantern light casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. Tomorrow they would ride to San Carlos. After that, the future was uncertain. "Naichi," Caleb began, then stopped, unsure how to say what he was feeling. She waited, patient as always. "These past weeks, since I met you, I've felt more alive than I have in 3 years. More like myself. The self I thought I'd lost at Sand Creek. You were always that self, Caleb. You just could not see it. I want to keep seeing it, keep feeling it, but I don't know how. I don't know what comes next." Naichi stepped closer. "I also do not know, but I know I want to find out. With you. The cabin on the mountain, it's small, but it could be expanded. There's good water, good land. It could be a place for both of us, if you wanted. A place to heal people, both Apache and white. A place where we could build something." "Like a bridge?" she asked softly. "Like a bridge," he agreed. She took his hand, her fingers strong and warm. "Then let us build it. Together." They stood there in the quiet hallway, two people from different worlds who had found each other in the midst of chaos and chosen to believe that love was stronger than hate, that building was better than breaking, that the future could be different from the past if people were brave enough to make it so. The next morning, they rode out of 2 Rivers, accompanied by Geronimo and Chato. The town turned out to see them off. Sam pressed a heavy purse into Caleb's hands. "From the town. For supplies. For building." "Sam, I can't. You saved lives here, all of us. Take it. Use it well." Father Rodriguez gave Naichi a rosary, even though he knew she followed Apache traditions. "For protection," he said. "All prayers reach the same heaven." Sarah hugged Naichi like a sister, whispering, "You're always welcome here. Always." As they rode south toward San Carlos, Caleb looked back once. The town stood in the morning sun, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. A place where something impossible had become possible, where enemies had become neighbors, where fear had given way to hope. "You think it will last?" he asked Geronimo, who rode beside him. The Apache leader was quiet for a long time. "Some things last, some things fade, but the memory of what is possible, that never fades. You showed them that white and Apache can work together. That cannot be unknown now. That seed is planted." They reached San Carlos by evening. The reservation looked no less harsh than before, but something felt different. Word of what had happened in 2 Rivers had spread ahead of them. People gathered to hear the story, to see the woman who had stood up to a cavalry colonel and won, to meet the white man who had chosen justice over his own kind. That night, there was a gathering in the center of the reservation. Chief Victorio presided, his ancient face grave, but with something like hope in his eyes. Naichi told the story, speaking in Apache with Caleb beside her. She told of the conspiracy, of the guns that would have doomed them all, of the town that chose truth, of the ordinary people who did extraordinary things. When she finished, Victorio spoke. "For many years I have led our people in war. I have fought for our land, our way of life, our survival. But war has only brought us here, to this place of dust and despair. Perhaps it is time to try a different way, the way of Naichi and White Wolf, the way of truth and bridge building." A young warrior stood, anger in his voice. "You would have us surrender, accept defeat?" "No," Victorio said firmly. "I would have us survive. I would have us be smart. We cannot defeat them with weapons. They are too many. But perhaps we can defeat their fear with truth. Perhaps we can find allies among them, as Naichi found allies in 2 Rivers." The debate went late into the night. Some agreed with Victorio. Some called him a coward, a traitor. The wounds were too fresh, the losses too great for easy forgiveness. But a shift had occurred. A possibility had been introduced. And possibilities once seen cannot be unseen. Over the following weeks, Caleb and Naichi fell into a pattern. They would spend several days at San Carlos, where Naichi treated the sick and Caleb helped organize better water distribution and food storage. Then they would ride to the cabin on the mountain, where Caleb began the work of expansion, adding a room for healing supplies, enlarging the main space, making it a home for two instead of one. The work was hard but satisfying. Caleb's hands, idle for 3 years except for trapping and survival, remembered how to build, how to notch logs and fit them tight, how to split shingles and lay them true. His body remembered the good ache of honest labor. Naichi worked beside him when she wasn't treating patients. She gathered herbs from the high meadows. She set up drying racks for medicines. She turned a corner of the cabin into a proper healing space with shelves for herbs and a table for mixing remedies. She made it theirs. At night they would sit by the fire and talk, about their pasts, about their dreams, about the future they were building one day at a time. And slowly, carefully, they learned to be not just partners, but companions, not just allies, but lovers. 3 months after the events in Two Rivers, a letter arrived at Sam Ridgway's store, forwarded from Santa Fe. It was addressed to Caleb Stone, care of Two Rivers, New Mexico Territory. Inside was official documentation. Samuel Creed had been convicted of conspiracy to commit genocide and sentenced to hang. 3 executives of the Santa Fe Mining Consortium had received life sentences. And most importantly, a congressional committee was being formed to investigate conditions on Indian reservations throughout the West. Sam rode up to the cabin to deliver the news himself. He found Caleb and Naichi working in what would become a garden, turning soil in preparation for spring planting. They looked, Sam thought, like any other frontier couple building a life, except that they represented something more, something that could change the territory, maybe even the country, if people paid attention. Justice, Sam said, handing over the letter. Not perfect, but real. Caleb read it aloud for Naichi's benefit. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. My parents will not come back, she said finally. Marcus Blackwood Jr. will not come back. All the dead remain dead, but perhaps their deaths will mean something. Perhaps the future will be different because of what we did. It will be, Sam said with certainty. Already is. Two Rivers has gotten applications from 3 Apache families wanting to settle near town, to trade, to work. People are talking about integration, about cooperation. You started something, both of you. After Sam left, Caleb and Naichi stood together looking out over the valley. Winter was coming. They could see snow on the highest peaks already. Soon they would be snowed in, just the 2 of them in this cabin for months. The thought made Caleb smile. What are you thinking? Naichi asked. That I'm happy. First time I can say that in years and mean it. I am happy too. She leaned against him and he put his arm around her. Caleb, do you believe in fate? You asked me that before. I didn't have a good answer then. And now? Now I think maybe fate is just what we call it when our choices add up to something we couldn't have planned. I chose to step out from behind that rock. You chose to trust me. Every choice after that led here. Call it fate or call it will. Either way, I'm grateful. As am I. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of people who had learned each other's rhythms, Naichi asked, Do you ever think about having children? The question caught Caleb off guard. He paused in his chopping of vegetables. I hadn't thought. I mean, I'm nearly 40. And I am 28, old enough to know what I want. She looked at him directly. I want a family. With you. Children who grow up knowing both worlds, who speak both languages, who build bridges just by existing. Caleb felt something expand in his chest. Hope, fear, joy, all mixed together. That sounds perfect. Then we agree. Someday, when the time is right, we will bring new life into this world. Life that represents what is possible when people choose love over hate. They married that winter in a ceremony that would have shocked both their peoples. Father Rodriguez came up to the cabin on snowshoes, along with Sam, Sarah, and Doc Wilson. Geronimo and Victorio made the trek from San Carlos. The ceremony mixed Catholic tradition and Apache custom, prayers in 3 languages, witnessed by the mountains and the sky. There was no official license. Intermarriage was illegal under territorial law. But they didn't care. In their hearts, before their community, before God or the spirits or whatever power governed the universe, they were married. That was enough. Montana, 1917. The old man's voice faded as the story reached its end. Timothy sat forward on the porch, breathless, desperate to know more. "So you and Grandma Nietzsche lived happily ever after?" Caleb smiled, that rare expression that transformed his ancient face. "Not quite that simple, boy. We had hard times, winters when we almost starved, times when old hatreds flared up and people threatened us, but we survived. Together." "Did you have children?" "3. Your grandmother was one of them, born in 1880 right in that cabin. She grew up speaking English and Apache, learning to heal from her mother, learning to hunt from me. She married a good man, a railroad surveyor named Michael. They had your mother. Who had you?" "So, I'm part Apache?" "You are. Part Apache, part Irish, part German, all American. You're proof that different worlds can meet and create something beautiful." Timothy thought about this, processing the weight of it. "Grandpa, what happened to everyone else? Sam and Sarah? Geronimo? Chato?" Caleb's expression grew somber. "Sam died in 1895, peacefully in his sleep. Good man to the end. Sarah ran the boarding house until 1910, then moved to Santa Fe. Chato became a scout for the Army, tried to bridge the worlds like we did. Got himself killed in 1896, caught between 2 sides that never fully trusted him. Geronimo, he was captured in 1886, spent the rest of his life as a prisoner of war. Died in 1909, still dreaming of freedom. That's sad. It is. But boy, here's what you need to understand. We didn't win everything. We didn't change the whole world. Apache are still treated badly. Reservations still exist. Prejudice still exists. But we proved it was possible to do better. We proved that individuals, making individual choices, can create pockets of light in the darkness." "And Grandma Nietzsche?" Caleb's eyes grew wet. "She died 5 years ago. Pneumonia. She was 62. But she lived long enough to see you born, long enough to hold you and tell you stories, long enough to know that her legacy would continue in you." He reached over and gripped Timothy's shoulder. "That's why I'm telling you this story. Not because we were heroes. We weren't. We were just people who refused to let fear win, who chose to build instead of break, who believed that love was stronger than hate." "But sometimes hate wins, doesn't it?" Timothy asked, his young voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. "Sometimes," Caleb admitted, "but not always, and not forever. You know what Nietzsche told me right before she died? She said, 'Love doesn't end when someone dies. It continues, in the people we touched, in the lessons we taught, in the choices we inspired.' She was right. She's still here, Timothy. In you, in me, in everyone who heard our story and decided to try, to believe, to hope." The sun was setting now over the Montana Valley. Timothy stood, helping his great-grandfather to his feet. The old man moved slowly, joints protesting, but he stood straight. "So what's the lesson, Grandpa? What am I supposed to learn from all this?" Caleb looked at his great-grandson, seeing in those young eyes the future, seeing possibility, seeing hope. "The lesson is this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. One person can make a difference. Not by being a hero, but by making one choice, and then another, and another. Each choice building on the last, creating something bigger than yourself." He paused, then added, "And sometimes, Timothy, Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is see someone everyone else calls enemy and choose to see them as human. That's what changed everything. Not guns, not speeches, just the decision that the person in front of me is a person, worthy of dignity, worthy of respect, worthy of love. They walked slowly into the cabin as darkness fell. Inside, on the mantel, sat that same dream catcher from 1878, faded now, but still intact. Beside it, a photograph taken in 1910, one of the first photographs in the territory. An elderly Caleb and Nietzsche standing in front of their cabin, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Different faces, different colors, all one family. Timothy looked at the photograph, really looked at it, and understood. This was his legacy, not just a story, a responsibility. To carry forward the choice his great-grandparents had made, to build bridges, to choose love over fear, to believe, despite everything, that people could be better. "I'll remember, Grandpa," Timothy said softly. "I'll remember, and I'll try to live it." Caleb smiled, satisfied. "That's all anyone can do, boy. Remember and try. The world changes one person at a time, one choice at a time, one bridge at a time." Outside, the stars came out, the same stars that had watched over a mountain man and an Apache healer in 1878. The same stars that had seen them build something impossible and beautiful and necessary. The same stars that would watch over Timothy and his generation as they carried the story forward, keeping alive the memory that different worlds could meet without destroying each other. That courage was possible, that justice could be achieved, that love in the end was stronger than hate, and that sometimes all it took to change the world was one person stepping out from behind a rock with their hands raised, saying, "Hold it, this is wrong." One moment, one choice. One bridge built in the wilderness of New Mexico territory that would stand for generations, teaching anyone who listened that the greatest revolutions don't happen with armies and declarations, but with ordinary people making extraordinary choices in the face of fear. The story ended as all true stories do, not with neat conclusions, but with continuations, with legacies passed down, with seeds planted that would grow in ways the planters could never imagine. And somewhere in the gathering darkness of 1917, with war raging in Europe and the old certainties crumbling, a 12-year-old boy learned what his 81-year-old great-grandfather had learned at 25, that we choose, every day, what kind of people we will be. And those choices echo forward through time, shaping the future in ways both small and immeasurable. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the story worth telling and retelling as long as people needed to hear that hope was possible, that change was achievable, that one life lived with courage and compassion could ripple out across generations. And in a cabin in Montana, as an old man and a young boy said their goodnights, the story lived on, ready to be told again when the next person needed to hear it, needed to believe it, needed to know that they too could step out from behind whatever rock sheltered them and choose to make the world a little bit better than they found it.